Now that we have the ship movement systems pretty much working properly, I'm going to actually work on putting a little bit more detail on the map itself. So when we move around, the one thing that you'll notice is that the background remains pretty much static no matter where we go. Nothing really changes. And once we leave these cubes, you can't really tell that I'm moving at all until I get back to this area. So what I'm actually going to do is implement a system to put particles throughout little specks so that you can kind of tell that you're moving. To do that, I'm actually going to use the particle system. I did actually make a few improvements offline just to help clean up things and make it a little bit more robust. So here I just added up arrow keys. So if this is true, or the up arrow key, which lets you use the arrow keys near your number pad. I also set it so that if your current velocity drops below 0.1, it just puts it to 0. So if you're going really slow, it'll just stop you immediately. Another thing that I did is I added some functionality to the follow script for the camera. What it does is it checks for null to make sure there is a ship it's pointing at. It also changes the offset by the scroll delta. So when you scroll your mouse wheel, the Y value changes. So I multiply it by scroll sensitivity just so we have a way to control how fast it goes for different mouse, because different hardware affects how fast this works, so you can essentially throttle it. And the -1 is just because it was scrolling in and out was opposite to the way I wanted it, so I just inversed it by multiplying it by -1. These just keep it within a min and max bounds, which is 10 and 25, and then it applies it. Um, and that essentially gives us what we have now, which is the ability to fly around, scroll out, see more, and scroll in. So that's kind of our base functionality. So the next part is going to be the particle system. So the particle system is going to exist in the background. I put these cubes into a background object just so it's a little cleaner. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create an empty object that's going to contain the space particles. All right, so what we're going to do is add a particle component, particle system. Now typically a particle system will shoot out particles like you're seeing here. It's set to emit them constantly. So what we actually want to do is change that so that it doesn't emit them all the time, because what we're going to be doing is programmatically creating them. And what we're also going to do is change the size so that we don't really need them really big. And we actually have to set the particles as well. So let's see here. We need to change the material to a default that we're going to like. So let's try the default particle. And we're just going to turn emission on for a second just so we can see it in here. Yeah, so you can see it's shooting them out right now. So it does look like it's working. So the next step is going to be actually to add a new script, a new C# script called we'll call it space particles. There we go. And like always, we're going to attach our scripts to the object we want. We are going to need a reference to this particle system. So we're going to add that as a public variable on this object. So we're not going to do anything. Or actually, we are going to do anything. Everything's going to happen in start. We don't need an update function because this happened once at the beginning, and then it stays from that point on. So we're going to create this particle system object and just call it particle system. Like that. What doesn't it like about that? There's a component system that has that already. So what we're actually going to do is we'll just do an underscore there. It'll make it unique enough. All right. So now that we have the particle system, we're actually going to have to do a few things. So right off the hop, like we could just try to admit some, but it's going to use the default settings. So we actually want to change some things. And in order to do that, what we need to do is make some admit mid-parms objects to control that. So we're going to make a new one of those. And all this does is create an empty mid-parms object. We're going to set some values on that. So the velocity for these particles is going to be 0 because we don't want them to move anywhere. We want them to stay fixed. We also want to set the lifetime, which is how long they stay on the screen, to the maximum possible time, which is the maximum float value. It works out to about 11 days worth of time, so it's unlikely they're going to disappear within that time while you're playing the game. And that's how we'll do it for now. So the way that you actually go about emitting particles is you just do particle system.emit, and then you feed it in the emit parms and how many you want. So let's say 1 for now. And what we're also going to do is we're going to set a few other things. So let's see, emit parms dot particle size. Or start size is what we're looking for. We're setting it to particle size. Which hasn't been set yet, so I'm going to create that as well. Float particle size equals 0.1f. So that'll be 1 to begin with. We're also going to set their position equal to what we're going to do for now is we're actually going to make a new vector for a position, and we're going to do 0, but the ship is there right now, so we're actually going to also just do a loop. So we're going to do for x equals 0, x is less than, let's say, 20, x plus plus. So this will loop through and increment x until it reaches 20. Well, if we do equals, it'll go to 20 from, let's say, 1. Do 1 to 20. And inside here, what we're going to do is emit these particles. They're going to change. Just one moment here. There we go. So what it's going to do is we're going to go through 1 through 20s. Actually, I think I will take 0. And we're going to change the x value here. What this will do is, we can do particle size up here, is it's going to iterate from x 0 through 20, changing the position and emitting 1 particle at each point at the beginning. So we should be able to see that when it starts up. So let's give it a try. Actually, what we're going to have to do before we do that is assign that variable that we set here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So we just put a pointer to itself, save it, and then play. Let's see if it exists. Yeah, they do exist there. The problem is that they look similar to the other background elements, and let's see, background is also not at 0, which is a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix that up. So these were dragged in when background wasn't at 0. So the way to fix that is to take these out so they stay where they are, move background to where you want it to be, which is at 0, and then put them back in there. If we had just moved background, it would have offset these and messed everything up. So this also has to be reset to 0, and these should be where they were. Excellent. So let's try that again, and we should see those along the x-axis this time. Yeah, there they are. So you can see them at set intervals. There'll be 20 going off the screen that way, all the way over there. So we are showing some particles. This is the way we're going to put the different specks into the space, but they are all on the same plane at the moment, which is okay, but it would actually look better if they were parallaxed a bit, so that some were higher, some were lower. It would give a better feeling of depth. So we're going to do that. We're also going to spread them out so that they're everywhere. So I'm going to try that now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use random. So if random dot value is greater than 0.5, so random dot value will essentially set the, well, sorry, we'll essentially get a value between 0 and 1 exclusively. It says there, random number between, inclusively, sorry, 0 and 1. And what this will do is essentially only fire this code half the time. So half them will be one way, half will be the other at a random interval. And what we want to also do is set a value for the depth. So we're going to do, let's say, part depth, particle depth. And we're going to set that to a certain value, which let's say 0. Actually, let's do 3, positive 3. So make it a float. So part depth will be 3, and this is going to be in the y component. And then half the time it's actually going to be negative 3. So half of them will be above, half will be below. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so if we look now, we'll see that some are higher, some are lower at a random interval. And when we go into the game, we'll also notice when we're moving that they are offset. But they're actually at, well, they're all in a line, so it doesn't really look like space debris or anything like that. It looks very fixed. So what we're actually going to do now is just really scatter that up a bit. To do that, we're going to do another loop. And we're also going to do some variation here. So first what we want to do is go through, let's say, I'm going to make two ifs, or sorry, fors. One for the x and one for the y, so that'll make it so that it's multidimensional. We'll have to change this to y. This to y. We're also going to make it go from negative 50, not 500, to 50. So that'll go forward and backwards all over the place instead of just one side or the top corner. So negative 50 to positive 50. Y is actually technically mapped to z here, but we could have just said z. Actually, I think I'll change that. Do Alt Enter, or no, Control RR. Z. There we go. All right. So that's all z. X, Y, Z. That's the depth, random. So now what this will happen is it'll put them uniformly everywhere in a big grid pattern, half up, half down, which is going to look very unusual. Oh, and they're offset over in that direction. So you got to see why that is. Okay, the reason for that is that it's actually the particle system doesn't have enough particles to admit, so we need like a lot more of these. So let's say it's a maximum of 20,000, and then give that a shot.